guys, do you see the title for today? The lesson? No. The dragons and snakes. Yep, there was one more in there. Lions, dragons, and snakes. So here's the question for you. This is so I didn't have to do any prep time. I just ask you guys a question, you do all the hard work, okay? What do those three things have in common? You got it right off the bat. They're predators. They're predators. I just have you come over. No? Yeah, they're predators. In fact, Kevin read for us 1 Peter 5:8, where it says, Peter says, be sober or be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he shall devour. And I want to talk a little bit about predators to you guys today. Because do you ever think about the techniques of predators? You know what techniques are, Ella? Those are methods. Do you know what methods are? Those are ways of trying something. So you know how your mom has ways of getting your dad to do what he's supposed to do? Yeah? Do you want to share with us some of those? No? Okay. Maybe later. But so a lion, a method or technique of a predator is how a lion attacks and how it gets its prey. Does that make sense? Sort of. Yeah, he's got to catch them somehow, right? You know, when we think about lions, what's the first thing you think about? Sneaking up on you. You guys are just ahead of me because that is right, but that's not at all what I was hoping to hear. What else do we think about lions? What? Fierce. What makes them fierce? They're big. What do they have? Big teeth and claws, right? And so when we think about lions bringing down prey, we think about them overpowering stuff, right? And, you know, latching those great big teeth into something and holding on to it, and the claws so you can't get away, and just physically overpowering you. But Anna brought something up that's really, really important. When a lion is seeking its prey, there's a lot of steps that go in to the hunt before they can get a hold of the prey. In fact, a very high percentage of hunts are unsuccessful. The reason is the prey knows the lion's coming before he can get close enough, and he keeps away from the lion. And that's exactly why Peter said, be sober. What he means by that is be aware of what's around you. Because he doesn't say overpower the devil who's like a lion. He says beware. Why? Because the animals that are aware and see the lion coming are not the ones who get taken down. It's the ones whom they sneak up on. When we think about, and by the way, lions, serpents, and dragons are predators. But they're also the descriptions of the devil, right? And all of these things, and that dragon brings out all kinds of other concepts, right? Because it has other ideas with it. But predators all have techniques. The snake, how does the snake get its prey? By swallowing. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Poison it. But how do they get there? They have to sneak up on them. They're camouflaged, right? Yeah. Couple of snake stories. Christian one time was running through the yard at the farm, and there was a 6-foot black snake coming through a yard. He's in his bare feet and he's running. He stepped right in the middle of it. No, it didn't bite him because he was moving too quick. He made all kind of funny moves. and just kept going, right? Another time that he would like me to tell you, he and I were at our pond, and I said, you see that frog, Christian? He said, yeah. I said, I'm going to show you how you catch frogs. If you walk up on the shore to a frog, the frog feels the vibration on the shore, and he swims underwater, and you can't catch frog. You'll have to ask when you get home who taught me this. Yeah, who would want to catch a whole bunch of frogs? Does that sound like anyone you know? Yeah. So, but if you get in the water and you wade over to the frog, you can walk right up to them and snag them, as long as your hand comes from behind them. So I showed that to Christian. I snagged this frog, and I started to pick him up out of the pond, and frogs aren't supposed to weigh very much, right? But this frog had a hold of something, I thought. And his front legs were down in the pond, and I thought he was grabbing a hold of weeds or something. Doesn't sound like frogs, does it? No. And I couldn't get him pulled up, and I really had to pull him up and get a good handle on him. And when I pulled him up like this, I realized there was a 14-foot anaconda attached to this frog. Yeah, there was a snake, and his jaws were right next to my fingers. Now, Christians say he was way smaller than that, and he was a water snake. But it looked like a 14-foot anaconda, right? But here's my biggest point, is I didn't see him. Why? The frog didn't see him either, did he? He snuck up on him. Now, Christian's going to try and tell you afterwards I screamed. I did not scream, Casey. I did not scream like a girl. But listen, snake repellent calls sound very close to women screaming. Okay? But that snake, Christian, that snake left right away, didn't it? It let go of the frog. I said, see how well that repellent call worked? It was gone. Okay, so how do snakes get their prey? They sneak up on them. That's a real possibility. It sneaks up on them. Ernie gave me a story that I meant to bring about spiders. Spiders make webs, right? Now sometimes they're just out in the open where they know something else has to go. Other times they'll put something small, something sparkly in their web, and they jingle it so that other insects see it and are attracted to it, and they go for it, and they get caught up in the web. Here's the point. Satan does not just overpower people, especially Christians. What he does is he has all kinds of tricks of enticement to try and lure people close enough so he can get a hold of them. When you think about some of the things that you've gotten out the most trouble in your lives for, and when we talked at these three and this one, and those things aren't real big things yet, and then as we start to get into you girls, it's starting to get a little bit bigger, right? And then Christian and you guys are able to get into a little bit more trouble, right? And then if you were to turn and you were to look around, some of these people have caused problems that dwarf either of your problems so far. And here's the thing, when you look back, have you ever done anything you're embarrassed about? Yeah, I have. And you would tell yourself, I would never, ever, ever do that. You look at other people in school and around, and you see what they're caught up in. You say, that's ridiculous. Why would they do that? And that is the first step of Satan, getting hold of your hearts. Thinking that you could never do that you could never get caught up in that you would never fall victim to that. Because in saying that, we miss how it happens. Number one, predators and Satan use enticement. Snakes will go somewhere where other critters want to be. Right? Spiders and other predators will use something that looks good to eat. Does that sound familiar? Like a Bible story you've heard? Something that looked good to eat? And it ended up wrecking everything? Enticement. Most of what gets us in really big trouble, and when I say trouble, I don't mean like our parents growling at us and teachers give, I mean like the kind of trouble that affects us for years, if not the rest of our life, starts with something that looks really, really good. Here's the thing. We talk about peer pressure, right? In school, they just bombard you guys with talking about drugs and not using drugs and peer pressure. You've got a speech on peer pressure, huh? And they talk, but here's something I think it's easily overlooked. Peer pressure doesn't come very often with one of your friends saying, hey, do this. Hey, take this. That's not how it happens. It comes by being close to something and it looking good. And the way peer pressure really works is you saying to your friend, can I draw on that? That looks like a lot of fun. You can? Thank you. You see the difference? Sometimes we are looking for the peer pressure in what our friends are trying to get us to do. And we forget that Satan's number one skill is by making things that are destructive look like they'd be really cool and a whole lot of fun. Sometimes, not sometimes, a lot of times, predators use legitimate need. There's things that look good that I really don't need, that aren't as good as what they look once I get a hold of them. But then there's some things I have to do. I have to go there. Why do lions hunt at watering holes? Because all the gazelle and all of the oxen have to go to the watering holes. Did you know that there's some places you're going to have to be? There's some things that you're going to have to do in your life. They're going to put you at an increased risk of getting tied up into things that you don't want to be tied up in. Right? School may be one of those. We'll talk about how you can influence that in a moment. But school may be one of those situations, right? Where you have to be places. Understand that those are areas of vulnerabilities. You know what the gazelle do when they go to the watering hole? Did I look like gazelle, Casey? No. Did I look like that? You don't know what a gazelle looks like. I really should have had a PowerPoint, huh? It's a weird looking deer. Oh yeah. But they're aware, right? We should be vigilant. That's what Peter said. And then lastly, there's this idea of division. Division takes place all the time, but there's people that are helpful for you, and then there's people that aren't helpful to you, right? Let me give you an example. Do you ever feel at odds with your parents? Do you ever feel as though your parents aren't on the same page as you or even on the same team as you? Don't you answer. What? It's kind of the nature of things, right? Sometimes you want something, you want to do something, and your parents say no. In fact, they're always saying no, and they have curfews and bedtimes and rules and times when you can't go down the road to the neighbors, and then you have to go home before you want to, and all these inconveniences in life, they're absolutely no fun. Have you ever heard of the 4 oxen and the lion? You ever heard that story? It's a short one. It's a good one, though. It's one of Aesop's fables. You see, there were 4 oxen who lived in an area where a lion prowled about. But every time that lion tried to attack, they were met, no matter what direction he came from, he was met by the horns of one of the oxen. Because they always stayed together, and they always kept their backs to each other. And so no matter what direction the lion came from, they saw him and they helped one another. But inevitably, just like human adults, confrontation and division came in amongst them, and they decided to all go their own way to graze. One by one, the lion picked them off. We're going to talk in a moment about the strengths and the ways that we can overcome temptation. One we've already addressed is being vigilant, being aware of what's around us. But having good allies is possibly the most important. Number one, our ally is God. And there's times in our lives when we are going to come into confrontation with God, because we want something that he doesn't want for us. And we've got to decide, am I going to walk away from my ally? Am I going to create some distance with my ally? You know, you guys are becoming so much closer as friends and spend so much time together. This group for you guys can be a great source of allies. Friends who will help you, who will tell you the truth. Well, I mean that, the truth isn't always, oh, you're doing a great job, Evie. Sometimes it's not so good, right? And you need someone to say, you need to step to the right, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. Allies are the greatest way that you're going to combat Satan. Some of these people in here are great sources of help and allies for you. They might not always tell you what you want to hear. Now, Bob's one of the greatest sources of encouragement, but he's also just about as straight a shooter as they come. Has Bob ever told any of you guys something you didn't want to hear? I heard him tell you something, and you something. Last Sunday night, you wanted to argue with him. He said, Munchkin, did you get in trouble? You said, no. He said, yes, you did. Yeah, you didn't. She's still arguing with you, Bob. Here's my point. Sometimes, when we hear things we don't want to hear, we don't like that and we want to draw away. But sometimes the things we don't want to hear are exactly what we need to hear. Don't create separation from your allies. If I can remember where I set this, there's ways of protecting. How do prey animals protect themselves? Number one way. You mentioned the others around them. How about numbers? Yeah. See, there's two things. I always thought numbers meant that maybe it would be Jake that got eaten and not me. Or it wasn't Jake, maybe it was Debbie, right? The more there are, the more likely I am to not be the slowest. But there's much better advantages to numbers than that. Zebras are colored the way they are because they distract and they disorient the prey. They can't do that by themselves. They do that when all the lines are blurring back and forth. Those oxen put themselves back to back so they can protect one another. It's not just about the likelihood of someone else falling. It's the fact that no one is likely to fall when we all stick together. Secondly, is wisdom. There's lots of things sought out in this world. I encourage you guys early in life to seek wisdom. Pray for wisdom. For those of you that can read read the Proverbs. Wisdom is what will help you. God's wisdom through life to make proper decisions. And lastly, Christian, I'm going to ask you to come up here if you would. Because you're mine, you can't say no, and if I damage you, then you're insured. I know that for sure. Lastly, I brought this up earlier. And if you, don't be shy. Have you ever, it's unburned. Which spots? Right there, okay. I won't touch there then. Have you ever, I was going to ask you this, but have you ever gone somewhere that you thought, I didn't think I'd go that far as doing something wrong? Yeah. We kind of dealt with that earlier in life, that because enticement, we look at other people and the wrecks in their lives and we say, man, I would never end up there. And they would have told you the same thing. But the way that happens is one little step at a time. One little step at a time. One little step at a time. And you see, that's not very far. And so one little step at a time, and I'm already here, another little step doesn't matter. But in time, you will end up somewhere so far from where you could have ever imagined that you won't even recognize who you once were or who you are currently. But I want you to think about this. That same principle is something that is beautiful for the good. Paul said to the Philippians, chapter 4, that whatever is good. Finally, brothers, he says, think on these things. Whatever's pure, whatever's good, whatever's honest. He goes down through the whole list. It's one of those lists of the Bibles. We make lots of lists where it's not lists. Some of the really important things, we make them electives, right? But we as adults aren't so good at this, right? Of putting our mind on the good. Think about our conversations as we eat today. And ask yourself, is this conversation in line with Paul's admonition to think on the good? And I say to you guys, if you think on the good, you think on the pure, you think on the honest, the good report, and you dedicate yourselves to that, you will be amazed where you end up in a positive sense as well. But here's the ticket, and here's what I want to leave you with today. You take someone's hand, they have a big impact on where you go. You see that? And Christian really, he didn't even think about coming up here. And yet because he's bound to me, he came up here, and then not only did he come up here, but I can influence where he goes. And you see, Christian's making decisions day by day on where he goes and what he does. If he puts himself in a particular direction, he will end up, for the good or for the bad, far, far from where he is today. But here's the most important thing. You see, what most of us try to do is to walk the fence, to be a little bit good and to be a little bit bad. But what happens, James says, the unstable or double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. And while he's like this, he will never accomplish anything good. Choose. Thank you, both of you. Choose who you're going to serve. Choose what you are going to become. And make sure, just small steps, day after day, that you're becoming something that will make you proud, that will make God proud. And everyone else, that'll come all by itself. You worry about you, and you worry about God, and become something great. You can do that by being God's. The message is yours. these guys and yours. And the question I end with all of us is, what are you becoming? What direction are you going? And what will you be in the future? Without Christ, it is not what it could be. So this morning, if we can help you in any way to get closer to Christ, to take any spiritual steps whatsoever you need to take, I encourage you to make that known as together we stand and sing.